Today's fires burn 5 times hotter, 5 times faster, and produce smoke 400 times more deadly than ever before. Firefighters have less time to save the lives and property that we're tasked with on an everyday basis. In addition to that, while doing that job, incident commanders don't have the ability in real time to know who of their personnel is in and out of a structure, which is paramount for safety.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo! Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast dedicated to startups outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Jay Klaus, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Swedish Fish himself, Eric Hornung. How you doing, Eric?
I am gorging on Swedish Fish. That's how I'm doing, and it is fantastic. I'll say that Swedish Fish are in my top 3 candies of all time. And we're sitting here, we're recording. I'm about to run to lunch. I haven't eaten all day. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and Jay goes, "Hey, I'm early. Let's hop on the podcast." So I haven't eaten. I haven't eaten any real food. I've only eaten about 500 Swedish Fish. That's where I'm at today, Jay.
Yeah, but look at what we get to do instead. Who needs sustenance when we provide such substance to our listeners here? I also, when I said, "How you doing?" and you said, "I am gore," I thought you were going to say gorgeous. And I was ready to dispute that right away.
That's how you looking. That's a different question. You got to start with how you looking, and then I'll get to I'm gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Do you have a favorite candy? That's a real question. I don't think I've ever seen you eat candy.
That's surprising because I have one of the sweetest of teeth. Tooth is not the plural of teeth, of tooth. One of the sweetest teeth that you'll ever come across. I love candy. I think there are 2 camps when it comes to candy. You have the chocolate camp, and you have the gummy camp. And I am all in on the gummy camp. So
I'm gummy camp too.
I'm with you on the Swedish Fish. I'm a big peach ring advocate, a big Lifesavers gummies advocate.
You know how when you were like a kid, there was summer camp, and on the one camp on one side of the lake and one camp on the other? I just imagine, as you said, chocolate camp and gummy camp, those are just 2 like warring factions across a lake in like prepubescent childhood.
That's amazing.
So that's where my brain went.
It was actually only recently. I never did summer camp as a kid. I did a 1-week camp that was just a couple hours a day called Camp Inquire. And it was kind of like students who did really well academically. They got to go to this special like continued learning camp. It was only recently that I realized that summer camp was created because adults don't have summer. My parents are high school teachers, so those had summer. And it really wasn't until recently that I understood why summer camp was a thing.
Because there's no summer, and because some parents just don't want to deal with their children.
Yeah. No, I get it now. I get it. All right. Well, off of the candy train and into while we're all here at Upside, we have another conversation for you guys, another interview with a founder outside of Silicon Valley. Today we're talking with Michael Maher. He is the founder and CEO of Three Firefighters. He is a firefighter himself. He's had 17 years of public service as a career firefighter and paramedic. So thank you to Michael, first of all, for his service. That's fantastic. Three Firefighters develops tools and equipment that helps make firefighting safer and more effective by augmenting your manpower. Their premier product is called the Door Boss, and it's something that affixes to the door frame as the firefighters are entering a home, and it allows to control the flow of air into the burning home. Because air going into a burning home is what feeds the flames and makes the house go up in flames faster. This is a way to fight that.
So I want to give the listeners a little background. As the podcast has grown, we've had to go from personal recommendations to great founders, which is still how we bring on most of our guests. But we also have been getting inbound submissions, which is incredible because it's so awesome. Because we get these companies coming to us, which is really, really cool. This is the first company that has come to us that we haven't either found on Twitter or found through a connection. or found in our research that came to us and went through, I guess, a screening call and just blew us away. So Jay has not had the chance to speak with Michael one-on-one, but I did have a chance to learn a little bit about their story beforehand.
Three Firefighters is based in Zanesville, Ohio, which is just outside of Columbus here. And actually, after you had your conversation, I realized that I had seen Michael pitch once before here in Columbus during Columbus Startup Week at a pitch competition. And his pitch blew me away. I thought it was a really well formed pitch and very informative. So I've seen the product in action actually on a small model door, and it's really interesting. It's a industry. I mean, Eric, I don't think either one of us would claim to know much about firefighting or the struggles of that. But Michael's a career firefighter, and I'm interested. I think this will be a very unique conversation we're about to have.
Yeah, one of the things I like about this is targeted at Michael, but it also kind of expands to the startups we talk to, is when people that are insiders come up with a product or solution that meets a problem that everyone in the industry knows exists and no one outside of it knows it exists. And I think that this is one of those kind of ideas.
Totally. It's the complete antidote to what Andrew Goldner told us in our conversation recently, which is 42% of companies that fail because there's no market need. When something is built by an insider to solve a need they're facing as a practitioner, that's awesome. The biggest question at that point is, okay, how big is the market size and how do you go to market? And part of what made Michael's pitch to us compelling to bring him onto the show, in his initial email, he gave us a lot of statistics and information. He said this could save up to 3,000 lives and $14.3 billion in property loss annually. If those numbers are true and we can substantiate that, that's pretty significant. That's a big market size, and that's a lot of actual lives that can be impacted positively by this technology.
Do you have any shadows heading into the conversation before we jump in?
My biggest shadow and question here is understanding how the actual procurement process would work, because a lot of fire stations are related to the city governments. City governments have a procurement process, which is often not easy, and budgeting and getting into city budgets is difficult. They have to carve that money out from somewhere, and they usually have to go through an RFP process to actually engage a vendor once the vendor is in their system as a vendor that could be someone that sells to the city. So, in my short time as entrepreneur in residence with Smart Columbus, I learned a little bit about that process, and I'm interested to hear Michael's approach, because I'm sure from just the pure firehouse and firefighter side of things, they'd love to have this tool. How do you get it to them? One, from making them aware, and then two, actually get it in their hands and get paid for it.
Absolutely. The political side of things is my biggest shadow as well. So hopefully we get some answers to that in the conversation with Michael. You ready to jump in?
Yep, absolutely. And before we jump in and talk to Michael, I want to remind you guys, if you are somebody who thinks you could be a good guest for our show, certainly email us the way that Michael did, hello@upside.fm. You can also connect with us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, whether about this specific episode or about our show in general. You can tweet at us at UpsideFM. We'd love to make this a conversation and learn what you're thinking and what you're hearing from our guests like Michael. All right, let's do it. Michael, welcome to the show.
Appreciate the opportunity. This is a big fan of the Upside podcast, and big honor to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate those kind words, man. We like to start off our podcast with a kind of question about the founder, kind of taking you back to your roots to get an understanding of who you are. So can you tell us about the history of Michael?
Sure. So I'm a career firefighter and paramedic with 20 years of public service experience. Being a public servant, firefighter, medic is all that I ever wanted to do. I think if you ever speak to one of us, we can reflect back to when a parent, grandfather, grandmother took us to our first firehouse and just fell in love with it. I can honestly say I've never wanted to do anything else but serve the public in my capacity. It's been a big honor over the last 2 decades. Can't believe it's gone this fast. We do a lot of good things for the public, obviously, and great recognition. Love my career.
When did you go to your first firehouse?
Went to my first firehouse. I was probably about 5 years old. It was Station 17 right there in the hilltop of Columbus, where I grew up with my parents. And one of the firefighters was, of course, kind enough to invite me in, put me in the front seat of the engine, and at that point, it was on from there.
Did they have a pole that you got to slide down?
I don't recollect that. I'm sure that would have been fun. I would have liked that at age 5.
Second question on the cliche firehouse questions front. Was there a Dalmatian?
There was. I do remember that. And early in my career, we actually had a Dalmatian at our department, Blaze, rest his soul. He was great for PR with kids and PR in general. He retired probably about 5 or 6 years ago, went home with one of the senior firefighters and, finished out his life in comfort, and very happy about that.
Blaze is a great name for a firehouse dog.
Yeah, it was. He was a good boy. Did the stop, drop, and roll. We take him out to the PR events. Kids obviously loved him, and we miss him.
What is it about Dalmatians that make them firehouse dogs? Is there something that their breed is predisposed to?
I don't know. It definitely is a symbol of the fire department. Blaze was good for us, so I could testify to his public service.
You mentioned that a lot of people who get into public service have a family member that started there, and that's where the interest came from. Who in your family was the one that either ignited that interest for you or took you to the firehouse the first time?
I remember my mom told me at a very young age. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old now, so I'm experiencing all those delights of being a parent of a toddler and what their interests are. Of course, my 4-year-old frequently talks about coming to the firehouse, which he does, and set up some small pieces of equipment and put on his outfit. And, we have a lot of fun together. It's good memories that, we will have together forever. But I think it was my dad. I think, growing up in the hilltop of Columbus, we passed a firehouse. Obviously, begged him to take me in. I'm sure he relented one day and did it. That's all I've ever wanted to do. I mean, fascinated with fire trucks as a small kid and just fell in love with it and never looked back, really.
Besides the public service side of it, what about being a fireman was something that really drew you in?
Outside of the public service, I'm not sure if it was anything really more than that. Just, extending a hand to, your community, to be there in a time of need. It's always been a big deal to me. It sounds cliche, but, it's in your heart. You do this job for 2 decades like I have and many others. It has to be that.
You mentioned that you also serve as a paramedic.
Sure.
With the military, I know that's kind of a path that you can go within when you enlist. How does that work in the world of firefighting, and what was training like for you?
Sure. So EMS, or emergency medical service, paramedics, EMTs, all rather synonymous. That is the bulk of what we do in regard to number of responses, out of the firehouse. I'm cross-trained as both a paramedic and a firefighter at my municipality. That's mandated, so you can fulfill all those roles on an as-needed basis. Some department systems throughout the United States and the world, they're focused on, just fire or just EMS. So that's the way that's structured. With regard to my path as a medic, after high school, age 18, went to Columbus State Community College, pursued an associate degree in emergency medical technology there. At the time in which I went through, there were 3 levels of EMT: basic, intermediate, and paramedic. I achieved all those certifications along with the associate program. I was very fortunate at the age of 19 to get a job full-time in Delaware County. As you can recollect, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Delaware County, southern Delaware County, due to urban sprawl out of Franklin County, jobs were just abundant for me. So I took one with Delaware County EMS, worked there for 11 years before moving on to the fire service. It's been a great career.
All right, one last question on firefighting specifically. Are there any misconceptions that people tend to have about firefighting? So many kids grow up and they say, I want to grow up and be a firefighter. And we have this almost like deification of the role. Is there anything that you see that people believe about firefighters or the act of fighting fire that is different than what they'd expect?
Well, I'll tell you what I've learned most recently, as I'll be turning 40 in December, is very much a young man's game. Let me tell you, it's very physical. You're up. We work I personally work 24-hour shifts. I'm off 48. The bulk of those 24 hours, you're up serving the public at all hours, based on the response requested. We do a lot of public service at my fire department with regard to extending a hand in the middle of the night with malfunctioning CO and smoke detectors, to installing those detectors when they go faulty, and of course responding to the emergency runs, emergencies that most would define it as.
I have a question on that. So you do 24 hours. How often are you going out on an emergency run? Is it once a shift? Is it like once, 2, 3 times? Like what's like an average?
I'd say an average, you're going to be responding to an emergency on one of the 3 trucks. At my fire department, we have a fire engine, we have a ladder company, a ladder truck, and of course we have the paramedic ambulance unit. It's all day. One of those 3 trucks is moving rather at all times to some emergency or some call of need from the public.
Jumping back into the idea of it being a young man's game, have you ever been on a calendar?
No, you don't want this young man on any calendar, I'll tell you.
It would have just been awesome if we could have put that in the show notes and you were like,
oh, no, not me.
So, Michael, obviously you're on the show because you have a business now that you've started. Was entrepreneurship in your family at all? Or what was your first foray into the world of entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurship is deeply rooted in my family, but not for the last generation before me. When my family immigrated from County Carlow, Ireland, it was 3 brothers that established a haberdashery in upstate New York, in Utica, in fact. Very proud of that. I mean, just think about the guts that it would take to leave a nation and your family to come to the United States and just make it. And I think that's what makes America beautiful today, is we're a nation of immigrants that someone in our family 100 years ago or less had the guts to come over and make a better life for themselves. I have a really cool story. My wife and I vacationed in 2012 to Ireland, and because of my uncle, who's awesome at genealogy, he's educated me a lot about my ancestry there. So of course we went to County Carlow. Just by happenstance, we went by a firehouse. I met a fire captain there who was very welcoming and just had a really good day of it, and really didn't think much more of it until I founded the company and I began searching for opportunities to test the door boss in a live fire environment. And I said, hey, you know what? I remember that guy who said that they were building a state-of-the-art training facility there in County Carlow. I wonder if he'd allow me to come back. And he did. So it was an awesome story to go back to my ancestral roots with a startup company to test the door boss in a live fire environment. And I did that, obtained great data, great feedback. It meant a lot to me to do that. And it was covered through their local media really well, which was humbling and good for me to splash that on my social media here, which I've done.
That's cool. My family's from County Clare, so right down the road.
Yeah, beautiful place. So how I got into entrepreneurship with my company, Three Firefighters LLC, is there was a problem, 2 problems in fact, in the fire service that I believe wholeheartedly that I have solved. And I knew I could do it from the beginning. And it's been an arduous road, but I'm proud of that because that's what it takes.
So what are those 2 problems that you're solving?
So the modern fire environment, which is composed of a couple of variables. Let me just tell you this. Today's fires burn 5 times hotter, 5 times faster, and produce smoke 400 times more deadly than ever before. Firefighters have less time to save the lives and property that we're tasked with on an everyday basis. In addition to that, while doing that job, incident commanders don't have the ability in real time to know who of their personnel is in and out of a structure, which is paramount for safety. So my first product, the door boss, is anchored at the threshold of the entry and exit point at which firefighters use to go in and fight fire. Because of where it's placed, we can easily track firefighters as they enter and exit the structure in real time for use by incident command and post-incident for critique, documentation, and training.
How does the tracking aspect of that work?
It's very simple. So we have a piece of technology that is sewn or placed into the firefighter's garment, a jacket, pants. As he or she enters the structure, the tool detects one's presence as they enter and exit. It can count them in and out in real time.
Was that one of the original aspects of the door boss, or was that something that you kind of came to later after you already had the technology to prop the door open?
It was, I knew I wanted to solve both of those problems at the same time, but I had to have an anchor. I had to have a tool to seat said technology on first. So that was my first objective, is to build out the tool, the door boss, that holds the door in a mostly closed position, restricting fire growth by limiting the amount of oxygen that can feed fire. Again, because of where it's placed there on the threshold of the door, you can count firefighters in and out in real time.
So why do fires burn so much hotter and are so much more deadly in the smoke and all the facts you just gave? Why has that changed so much? Those seem like some big jumps.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So approximately 30 years ago, manufacturers of goods, the curtains, the carpet, the upholstery, our clothing, etc., began manufacturing their wares with the use of synthetic materials. These are all, built out of unburnt fuel. Essentially, it's petroleum-based product. So when you light it on fire, it burns that much hotter, that much faster, and the smoke that these substances produce are so carcinogenic, they're 400 times more deadly than just decades ago.
I want to say this back to you, make sure I'm tracking on this correctly, and make sure our listeners are picturing this correctly. So the door boss is almost like a reinforced rod, right? And it affixes to the door frame and the outside of the door. So the door is at a constant level of opening, some constant distance of open that's not too open so that less oxygen gets into the door frame.
So the door boss is a simple tool placed by a first arriving firefighter that clamps on to the door frame. There's an extension arm off of that clamp that holds the end of the door, holding it in a mostly closed position, and in specific, about an 18-inch gap. That distance was thoroughly investigated at Underwriters Laboratories and the National Institute of Standards and Technologies to be the most appropriate distance to both allow fire hose to deploy into a structure for means of extinguishment, while also limiting the amount of oxygen that can feed fire.
And how is this done before door boss? So take me back 10 years ago, before door boss existed, before anything like this existed. How would you track people in and out? How would you make sure that the door was open the right amount?
So we'll start about fire control via flow path control. That's the science. Those are the key words that are researchable to control fire by limiting the amount of oxygen that can feed it. So, you said 10 years ago in the United States, it wasn't being done a lot. And that's why fire became so much more devastating in the last number of decades to allow Underwriters Laboratories, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to investigate the point. When available, a set of hands, manual door control was being used. This is actually what was used at the aforementioned studies at UL and NIST. The problem is manual door control is not practical at 94% of fire departments in the United States due to lack of manpower. This makes the door boss a must-have at 94% of fire departments. When the UL science came out, in addition to using a set of hands when available, firefighters have been using wooden and plastic wedges. However, if you place a wedge on the outside aspect of the door, the friction from the hose simply knocks the door off of the wedge. If you place a wedge on the other side, you can actually create a trap for a firefighter in an untenable environment, which you'd never want that. Common hand tools that we use in the fire service have been attempted to be used, but again, they're easily knocked out of the way. As you can imagine, as we pull that fire hose through the threshold of that door is again swinging wide open, allowing that entire channel of air to feed the fire. Now, you've asked about personnel accountability. What has been used and what's currently being used are what we call personnel accountability tags. Let me just walk you through it very quickly. At the beginning of every shift, I have a name tag on the back of my helmet that I place on a 3x5 placard placed on the dashboard of the respective fire truck that I'm on that day. Upon arrival to the emergency, the driver of that truck walks that 3x5 placard, what we call a passport, over to the incident commander, who, based on assignment, shuffles these placards around a larger board to account for firefighters in real time. The problem is you can recognize all of the gaps that can occur. I could not place my name on the 3x5. The 3x5 may not make it to incident command for a number of minutes because, let's face it, we're at an emergency here. A building is literally on fire. People need help. Drivers of a fire truck are the most busy of the individuals there for, if not the entire scene, but certainly the first couple of minutes. Obviously, fire is more dangerous in the first couple of minutes upon arrival. Incident commanders do not know currently in real time who's in and who's out definitively, and I have solved that problem.
This is going to maybe be a little in the weeds, but I kind of want to go there. Can you almost give me like a play-by-play of what happens once you're called to a building from like a team level view and how much time is passing during that experience?
Yeah, I just felt chaos in that last answer. Like I would be scared.
No, it's not chaotic because we're all trained professionals that are assigned to a seat on each respective truck. That seat has a number of assignments upon arrival. It's actually very seamless when we arrive. So you asked me to walk you through. We're at a full-time fire department. You've got personnel in the wait to take an emergency upon dispatch. Upon dispatch, we'll assemble at the fire truck very quickly. We'll don our fire gear, obviously get on the truck, safely drive to the scene. Upon arrival, each respective personnel member begins doing their job. I'll try to be as focused as I can because at my department, a fire engine will arrive with 3 individuals, a driver of the truck, an officer in the front, and what we call a third seat man in the back. So the driver obviously arrives after arriving safely. That's paramount. They're going to establish a water supply and assist the third seat guy getting the hose ready in the front of the structure so it can be effectively deployed into the structure. At that time, upon arrival, the officer is doing what we call a 360 around the structure. Think of walking around the building to find out what you can see. Maybe there's someone in the back of the building in a window that needs help immediately. Obviously, that becomes priority. Or you can see where the fire is in the back of the house and say, you know what, instead of going through what may be the front of the structure, it may be more effective to come around the rear and just hit the fire in the kitchen, etc. So after that 360, that officer meets the third seat guy at the front door and begins to deploy what we call an attack line, that first fire hose that go into the structure to effectively extinguish the fire and rescue any victims that are in sight.
By the time you get past the 360 to the front of the house to meet the third seat guy, how much time do you think has passed?
Well, obviously the biggest variable there is what was the distance to the structure from the firehouse. We assemble to the truck in less than a minute. I think most municipalities that have paid departments can get to the structure within 6 minutes or less. I can testify to that at my department. So we'll think 7 minutes.
Okay, so you're at the front door, and this is the time where door boss comes in, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Talk me through that.
So when I built out the door boss, I knew that there were a couple must-haves because the A-type personalities that firefighters are, the A-type personality that I am, if you change how I do my job, we're going to have a really big problem. So I knew that the door boss would have to be, and it is, compatible with the standard set of tools that firefighters bring to the front of the structure anyway. It can be deployed onto the door frame using the very same body position and body mechanics that we use to breach a door, to crack that door open in order to go in. So after the 360 is complete by the officer, after he or she meets the third seat firefighter at the front door, the intel from the 360 is going to be shared. A quick 3-second plan of how we're going to go in and do this, even though we're trained to do it anyway. We'll touch base. We'll breach entry into the structure if necessary. Usually doors are locked. No one's there to greet us saying, hey, come on in. So we'll get that door open. Within 2 seconds, we'll place the door boss on the door frame. We'll effectively move the hose line in. The last person in line there, which would be the officer, will simply reach back, place the arm of the door boss on the edge of the door, creating that effective 18-inch gap to restrict the oxygen able to feed the fire, and simply go in and do our job that we're trained very well to do, which is extinguish the fire and save lives and property.
So how much testing went into the creation of the door boss? Can you walk me through the product development? It sounds like you have a great understanding of how it needs to be used, but what was version 1 and what version are we on now?
So when the door boss was a napkin sketch, I just knew I had to have some sort of clamp and an arm to create that 18-inch gap that was cited by UL and NIST. After protecting my intellectual property with a provisional application, I sought out Rev 1 in Columbus and was admitted into their Concept Academy. Had a great experience there over 2 weeks. Performed my diligence and was referred out to Muskingum County Business Incubator, MCBI at the time, and then moved on to Tech Growth Ohio. where I successfully asked for 2 rounds of seed funding to fund multiple SOWs or statements of work to build out the door boss. So you recognize the Idea Foundry presence today via the T-shirt, but that's where I started. I'm proud of Columbus, Ohio. I'm proud of the state of Ohio and what we're doing for entrepreneurship here, and began working with one of their resident companies and groups of engineers to build out the first gen, which was very basic. It was a clamp and an arm, and began moving on to 3 additional revisions, and I'm on Gen 4 right now.
What's the biggest change between V1 and V4?
I think it was the ability to clamp the door boss on the door frame. I had to have something that was ergonomic and quick to deploy, which I've successfully done.
One more product question. What's the mechanism for when I'm exiting the building now that it's been clamped? How do I get out of there without having the same sort of trap that you described with the wedges?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that question, because that's a question that I'm asked most frequently by firefighters when I demonstrate. The door boss will never trap a firefighter in an untenable environment. A firefighter entering from the outside simply walks through the arm, and that cup on the edge of the door will come off, very quickly. A firefighter from the inside, there's a slap handle on the edge of the arm of the door boss that on any body position can simply, with one swipe of the arm, move that cup at the edge of the door off within, less than a second.
When was the first version created? What year?
The first gen was created just before the beginning of 2016. I believe it was like December 3rd. It comes out to me because I was just doing a slide deck most recently about that. December 3rd of 2015.
And when was the first time it was used in the field?
So the door boss currently isn't being used in the field. However, I have performed multiple tests in a live fire environment at highly respected training facilities in the United States, sharing the door boss and its user ability with decision makers of tools and equipment at multiple large municipalities with great efficacy. All of that started in April of 2017 when I had a model that I was very confident in that I could test in a live fire environment.
And what's the biggest kind of hindrance to getting it actually out and into the field today?
I haven't encountered any hindrance per se, but firefighters are tool people. We're very hands-on. So if there's any obstacle that I've been able to meet is to get out there and get the tool in the hands of my users, those decision makers of tools and equipment that I cited just a moment ago. You have to be present. You have to get to the academies to share this. But what is really good for my ability to market the door boss is that we do a lot of online training, a lot of social media channels firefighters have to train on new tactics, tools, and equipment in the fire service. And I'm going to be using that with great diligence moving forward.
One of the things that Jay and I like about founders is when they kind of have an inside scoop into the industry that they're going into. One thing that comes with that is the ability to understand who the real decision makers are. And you alluded to decision makers earlier. I'm curious, who are the people at the firehouse or outside of the firehouse who have to be convinced to adapt this into standard operating procedure?
So in my tenure as a firefighter, I've attended trainings, off-site from the fire department many times where I've been introduced to new tools and equipment. We get our hands on it, performing the tactics during training. And, you like this tool a little bit better for some reason. You get really excited about it. We're tool guys. We like to do that and experiment. You come back to the firehouse and you remove the trucks from the truck bay. Your crew assembles out there, and you share your new piece of knowledge and let guys train on it and get excited about it. And that's usually how it goes. And enough guys get excited about it, they target the decision maker at the fire department, which is maybe a senior firefighter, a lieutenant, a captain, maybe the chief, and sell them on your ability to do the job better, protect the property and lives of the community better with the use of this piece, and hopefully it's purchased.
So what needs to happen in your mind to get this into the field with the first department?
Going out as I have to training academies and, targeting those decision makers that, are drafting, literature in the common periodicals and, have the social media channels to get them to get their hands on it and, advocate for it. But I'll tell you, the ability to track personnel in real time it's going to be a game changer. I mean, think of the safety that will offer, and most especially the post-incident critique. Why did things go well? Why did things not go well? If you can timestamp your actions and find out what we did right and what we did wrong in real time, that's amazing. I can't wait to add that to my public service.
So talk to me about these experiences you've had going out to firehouses. Have you just been going out around Ohio? Have you been going out around the country? Are there conventions? How do you spread the good word?
When I formed Three Firefighters and began developing the Door Boss and the accountability technology, I knew that the biggest champion in my space would be Underwriters Laboratories. So I called them directly and I asked to be placed in contact with the lead investigator of the program that they spent millions of dollars funding. Why is the modern fire environment so devastating? So after his keynote speech at the world's largest firefighting trade show in April of 2016, I sat down with the lead investigator at UL's fire investigation body and shared with him what I believe to be the proper solution. Ethically, he couldn't and does not endorse the Door Boss because it's a publicly funded entity and program. But I think you're onto something here. Let me introduce you to a number of individuals that may be of assistance, going forward. And of course, I utilize those contacts to go to premier fire academies throughout the United States, targeting those decision makers of tools and equipment. Just went from there. Just a relentless pursuit of getting this in front of individuals that are highly respected in my space and that would provide the feedback necessary to develop a good product that I have.
So, Michael, you're working at a firehouse in Zanesville, right?
No. I work at a firehouse in Delaware County.
Okay.
Southern Delaware County.
So you're working at this firehouse in Delaware County. You know these guys. These guys trust you. You trust them. You go into high intensity environments all the time.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at these guys and you're saying, hey, this is going to help save the lives of the people that we're helping and, us, what's the barrier to doing it first with your firehouse and using that as a case study?
There's no barrier. So that's my intent, moving forward. I'm raising an angel round right now, leading into a Series A to develop the technology that I've referenced. I need to fund a first round of production to manufacture the tools and actually get them out there. Right now I have 5 on hand that I've paid for out of pocket to share, and I need to get that first run to get that out there. I wanted to answer your question about, you referenced trade shows earlier. I'm really excited about this. So my company was awarded an Ohio Image grant in the spring of 2018. So they pay for 50% of all initiatives to market your product internationally. So I've gone to Germany and returned with LOIs from 2 large municipalities there. Also have an LOI in hand with a conglomerate of 16 distributors in the nation of Germany. I'll be going to the United Kingdom later this month, September 19th and 20th, to attend Europe's largest firefighting trade show, where I have a booth there that'll demo both the Door Boss and the accountability technology. What's really exciting thereafter is I fly from London to Frankfurt to re-engage with the president of that conglomerate of distributors there to finalize a relationship. So very, very, very excited about that. And I should add that why I'm really excited about, entering the European space is that European firefighters have performed door control, limiting the amount of opening at the door for decades. And they have the same difficulty with personnel with the use of tags and Velcro strips and things too. So they're very excited about it and look forward to fulfilling additional interests formally.
So would you say that you have more interest from Europe than you do America at this point?
I've used the tools that I have in the bag, so to speak. I've had funding to, go over to Europe and get that piece of my market excited. I should add that when I met with the lead investigator of the UL studies, He said, listen, when you have the ability and the funding to get over to Europe, you need to get over there because these guys really get this. And my closest competitor, which is essentially fireproof blanket and a hanging rod hung high in a doorway, that was invented over in Germany. 80% of the population there cohabitates in multi-unit dwellings with one common staircase. So that product was used to seal the fire floor off from smoke, allowing those on other floors to evacuate without loss of life.
So I think if I'm reading between the lines here, you're saying that the airflow control is a more standard practice in Europe. Right now, the version of the tool you have doesn't have the technology finished for the tracking aspect, which is something that domestically people seem to be more interested in than the airflow control component.
I think they're interested in both, but I'll tell you, ears really perk up when you talk about the personnel accountability. Underwriters Laboratories and NIST have done a great job educating the United States and the world about airflow control and limiting fire growth via the opening at the door that we use when we deploy our hose lines into the structure.
Let's transition and get into some numbers. I know that you said you only have kind of 5 right now and you're looking into production. What do the unit economics on one of these things look like?
So a price point?
You can talk price point or we could talk cost if you want to talk like a build-up approach, and we can look at price after that.
We'll sell on price point. We're going to go to market with the Door Boss for $1,500 per unit. When I have an MVP, demonstratable MVP for the technology as we speak, I'm going to obtain market traction with the Door Boss alone, limiting the amount of air able to enter the structure. However, when the technology is developed, I'm going to sell the Door Boss and technology as a kit for a set price where a municipality would receive 2 Door Boss units, technology hardware, software, and a dashboard software to be used by incident commanders in real time during a fire. I'm also going to license that software out to the fire departments on a fee basis per firefighter for ongoing revenue for the company on a monthly basis.
What's the price of the kit that you would sell to the municipality if they're receiving those 2 units and the hardware, the software, the dashboard software?
$5,000 for the initial cost for 2 Door Boss units and the technology, and then license, per firefighter on a monthly basis thereafter.
What are the costs of some of the other kinds of equipment around a firehouse? Like, how much does a helmet cost? How much does... I know that those aren't directly related to your product. I'm just curious in terms of magnitude.
Sure. As you just stated, all the little small and large pieces of equipment that we have in a firehouse, that spectrum of price point is very large. But through my diligent research, I have found that a price point under $2,000 allows most municipalities to not be required to research for bid, which would obviously help.
I was going to ask a little bit about that. With my role with the Smart Columbus team that I had for a short period of time, that was my first foray into understanding how procurement works at a city level. So I'd love for you to just kind of expand on what you've learned in terms of procurement and avoiding going out for bid, and if that differs municipality by municipality.
Sure. Well, each municipality is certainly going to have its own, quirks and red tape for sure. But I would say the bulk of fire departments in the United States are 3 or less fire stations with less bureaucracy for procurement. Again, staying under that $2,000 price point per unit, my understanding is that there won't be a need for bidding, and that if fire chief or the decision maker likes said tool, they have the ability to purchase autonomously.
So it's the fire chief that would make that decision. Curious how it goes into the municipality's budget.
Ultimately, a fire chief makes all decisions, at the firehouse, most certainly when it comes to budget. My research has shown that fire departments have a built-in number within their budget to purchase tools and equipment at a smaller price point, such as mine. Obviously, timing, going forward to place the ability to purchase Door Boss units and said technology, I believe that'll be necessary as I scale.
Let's hit the cost side of things real quick, and then I have some questions around let's do cost. So we talked a little bit on the price side. What are you projecting when you get to scale these are going to cost? Or you can talk margins, cost, however you want to look at it.
Sure. As I get to scale, obviously my costs will go down. I'm really looking forward to getting to a manufacturing of 10,000 units. That would allow me to mold a number of my parts, and that tooling would be the best decision I could make at that point, which I would do. I'm happy to tell you that currently, as will be the case even in the future, 50% of my tool is off-the-shelf parts that I can source without having to tool. So if I can tool those other 50%, when I get to 10,000, that's going to be great for my company.
And are you planning on manufacturing in America? What's the supply chain going to look like?
Not only will I, but must I manufacture in the United States. My market would demand that. And I'm very proud to tell you my plan is to manufacture right here in Ohio with the contacts that I've made through my funding with the Ohio Third Frontier program.
So you've raised a little over, I think, $100,000 to this point, if I'm correct. And I'm just kind of curious where that has gone since you're on a raise now. I'm going to project a little bit, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I would assume a good amount went to R&D, a good amount went to marketing and travel and going to these trade shows. Do you have employees? Like, how's the rest of that broken out?
So I have no employees. Where the 100K has gone has been research and development and IP protection. So after 2 successful asks with the Ohio Third Frontier program, I completed all of my non-provisional protection, both domestically and internationally. Again, I'm on my 4th revision of the door boss. It's where all the money has gone.
You mentioned earlier that you traveled out of pocket. Does that mean you're kind of extending above and beyond that 100,000 as well?
Yeah, I believe I have about 23,000 out of my own pocket into this, funding, ancillary expenses along the way after founding the company and traveling internationally to do that.
So you mentioned that 94% of municipalities don't have the manual manpower to do manual flow control. Yeah. How many door bosses would each municipality responsibly need? You're selling them in 2 packs. I think you mentioned that you have 3 trucks. Sure. What's the number that's common?
There are 58,000 fire stations in the United States, each one of which house 3 to 5 fire trucks. Each one of those have the ability to respond first to a structure fire. So each truck should have a door boss on it, as it would need to be placed upon arrival and moving that first fire hose line in for means of extinguishment. Those that know their district, very well, which we all do, would know what structures exist within their district and may want to equip their truck with more than one door boss, such as a multi-unit dwelling, large structure.
So building that up into market size, how do you get to your total addressable market?
How do I get to my total addressable market? Other than, getting to the training academies and demoing the door boss and getting them excited about it.
How do you categorize your total addressable market? Like, how big is this opportunity?
Sure. So again, there's 58,000 fire stations in the United States. Each one of those house 3 to 5 fire trucks. There's 139,000 internationally with the same number in each one of those stations. Each one of those would require to stock a door boss on their truck for use. So that's the total addressable market there.
Is there any type of legislation or policy that can be crafted or that is crafted around like the state of our art equipment that needs to be used? And do you have any opportunity to help craft that?
Yeah, the NFPA, or National Fire Protection Agency, they mandate certain equipment on a fire truck, per protocol or per suggestion. I'm going to work diligently to share the door boss with NFPA and those decision makers to, of course, try to get the door boss on there per suggestion from such a large body, certainly on my radar.
Yeah, I mean, through this interview, you live and breathe this stuff. You're in it. Mm-hmm. You've built this out of a pure need. You've done it in a live fire environment, and you've seen the efficacy. So my biggest, outstanding question after all of this is just, what's stopping you? Why isn't this employed yet? What needs to happen for this to break for you and become the recommended on each truck tool for airflow control?
What I need to do is I need to obtain funding for the company. I need to successfully earn this next angel round for my company to have that first run of production, which would allow me to get the door boss in the hands of these decision makers at the academies, training facilities, and fire departments. By doing that, I'm going to create a lot of excitement and get this in front of those that publish in the large periodicals to get to the large masses. I'm going to train with this via social media, which is a great channel for marketing within my market, and just keep pressing forward. I'll tell you, everyone that I get the door boss and my technology for accountability in front of is thoroughly impressed. And I should add that I've only had the latest version of the door boss that I will take to market for the last 3 months. And I've been waiting for this grand opportunity in the UK. Again, it's Europe's largest firefighting trade show, and just keep earning these opportunities that will be obtained through my next funding round. And I hope to get that, as Three Firefighters has most recently been named by Venture Ohio as one of the top 50 startup companies in 2018. At this event, I'll have the ability to demonstrate the door boss and technology in front of multiple investors. I'm also going to fund a conference in Chicago in the third week of October, where I hope to earn the ability to get in front of investors there. That is my next step. It's absolutely necessary to fund first round of production, to get these units out there and trained with.
So you've mentioned this need for fundraising a few times throughout the interview. How much are you looking to raise, and are you raising currently, or is this like we're going to kick off in a month kind of thing, or how's that looking?
The reason why I'm going to the trade show in the UK is I have, through my investigation, or my market research rather, I found that my consumer would be willing to wait 6 to 8 weeks after order for this new technology, where with those purchase orders in hand, I could share those with the investors, which would be very exciting, or if necessary, fund first round of production through a personal bank loan with those purchase orders in hand and drop ship to those first initial clients of mine and move forward.
Why is the company called Three Firefighters?
So, as I alluded to earlier, at my department, it's a group of 3 firefighters that first arrive to a fire via the engine. So it made sense to me, and I like the name, and it always spawns the question, well, we know that it's you right now, why 3? And it kicks off a good conversation.
How long do you think it'll be just you versus what does a team look like under 3 firefighters? How could that be helpful to you, or is it not necessary?
Oh, it's certainly necessary. I'm building out my team right now. I'm going to add 2 additional members by the end of this quarter that are going to help with sales and training. 2 highly respected guys that I know that I serve with on a daily basis, and I'm going to integrate into the company. I have third-party SOWs out there right now for the technology. Again, I have a demonstratable MVP in hand right now. Upon taking in an investment in the company, I'm going to have a full-time CTO on my staff, certainly.
Great. Is there anything, Michael, that we haven't asked that we should be asking about this?
Sure. I was really hoping to delve into, in addition to the ability to save lives and property, why would a fire department want this? Why is it necessary, other than the fact that to facilitate the thorough and supported science, 94% of fire departments can't facilitate due to lack of manpower. I need to add that there's a 67% increase in firefighter death due to traumatic injuries over the last 30 years. And there's billions of dollars in direct and indirect costs due to these injuries incurred by municipalities and departments, due to these injuries. If we can decrease the loss of property that occurs in the United States, which, by the way, is $14.3 billion, and decrease losses indirectly and directly from firefighter injuries annually by billions, there's multiple reasons why fire department would want the door boss and accountability technology.
So when you say 14.3 billion in losses, are you referring to like insurance claim? Like what is that?
Sure. So on an annual basis, $14.3 billion of property loss occurs in the United States due to fire damage. So if you can decrease fire growth by limiting the amount of air that supplies fire, you can buy firefighters more time to save lives and property. And if you can put the fire out faster, you can save more of the structure. So think of your, proverbial $200,000 suburban home. If you can save half of it from burning, you just save the insurance company $100,000 in the cost. And more importantly to me, on an intrinsic level, think about that other side of the house that you protect that property for someone. It allows them to call home, and allow them to return to a normal life that much quicker.
Have you had discussions with insurance companies?
I've had initial conversations with my insurance. So I have a general liability policy, of course, from my company. I've shared this information with him, and we're going to continue to target insurance providers with these facts and hopefully, get this become a standard on fire trucks and decrease the liability of homeowners, which would directly affect insurance companies.
Michael, thanks again for coming on the show, and thank you for your public service. As someone who lives, in this area, I very much appreciate the amount of time and, sacrifice you've made personally to do what you do. After the show, if people want to learn more about Three Firefighters, where can they go?
Absolutely. So you can go to Three Firefighters, all spelled out.com. I hope to see a lot of your audience at the Venture Ohio event on September 13th. I'll be at Fund Conference on October 25th in Chicago, Illinois. And reach out to me on Twitter at #3 Firefighters. And I look forward to having a lot of conversations with how we can help save lives and property, decrease the loss of both individuals in the public and the fire departments.
Great. Thanks again. All right, Eric, we just spoke with Michael Maher of Three Firefighters. Let's get into the deal memo. Let's talk about this opportunity. Let's talk about the door boss. Let's talk about the company.
Let's talk about a phrase we use too much on this podcast, which is starting on second base. Am I right?
Yeah. Too much? I like this phrase. I feel like we use it an appropriate and tasteful amount.
Well, to each their own, I guess. I think we need to find a new phrase for it so we can jump around between phrases and it won't seem like we're just making so many baseball references. We got inside baseball. We got start on second base. I'm sure we have more.
Got to be a home run reference in there somewhere.
Oh, yeah. We've definitely said that this is a home run at some point. But looking at Michael, he definitely is starting on second base. There you go. I said it again.
There it is. Love it. Yeah. No, I like that. And I like that about him as a founder of Three Firefighters, obviously. And this is also where my biggest shadow comes in, which we'll get to a little bit later. There's my foreshadow on the shadow.
Wow. A foreshadowed shadow. You don't see that every day.
Yeah. Wordplay. Having fun here. I agree. Having him be a lifelong public servant in the fire industry, having those connections is probably the only way to bring this product to market, to be honest. So it's a good spot for him to be in. Here's the shadow. All through this interview, we hear lots of versions of the problem that are very clear to me and compelling, right? You have the amount of property damage, $14.3 billion in property damage, 66% increase in injuries over the last 30 years. We have that fires burn 5 times hotter, faster, and produce smoke 400% more deadly than ever before. 94% of houses don't have, or 94% of fire stations don't have the manpower to do manual airflow control. These are all really compelling problems, and if they are real problems, I got to know why this isn't in market, right? And to me, the question is, okay, you're working at this firehouse. What's the shortest distance to get that firehouse that you've been working in for years to put this into the field and use that as your first case study and go out and sell this thing? Because if I'm a fire chief at another station, that's going to be my biggest question too. If you're trying to sell me this product, is your station using it? And if not, why not?
I completely agree. That is my biggest shadow as well. I'm wondering if there's something to do with liability there, where it's an untested product. So it just makes getting that first sale so much harder. But you're right. He's an insider. So you would expect that he would be able to go to his own fire chief and say, look, I developed this product working on this job, hearing about your problems. Let's try it out. Or if not in a live fire, maybe in a demo fire. I know that those exist. There are practice runs and all kinds of things. So why not do it with your own fire department in one of those trainings?
Yeah, and he talked about it. I think he might have said that they did a live fire environment here locally. He definitely did it when he traveled back to the homeland. So he's used this in a live fire environment. And I've seen a demo of it in person at that Startup Week pitch that I was telling you. So I've seen it. It looks like it works. You use the word liability, and I think that may be what's at play here. Something that Michael told us off air that he said we could share here was that the general liability insurance is expensive, and that's partially why he needs the funding, is to help cover expenses like that, as well as manufacturing the units to go show to different stations. But I think you're right. It might be just the first mover thing here with liability. Because to me, if I'm looking at this as an investor, what pushes me over the edge is a fire chief that tells me, I understand this. This is a huge problem. Here's how much we'd pay for it. And in fact, we've been using it for 6 months, and this is how much we love it. If I have that in my back pocket, that's what pushes me over the edge to put in on this.
I completely agree. One thing that I thought was interesting, and we haven't covered much on the podcast, is a difference between the United States and Europe. We've talked a lot about Asia and the United States and kind of that interplay, but I thought it was fascinating that this product has so much more of a understanding in Europe than it does in America. And I was wondering if you just had any general takeaways about that.
I don't know. I'm not super internationally minded. I don't have a lot of experience traveling internationally as you do. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it comes from them having a longer history and they just have more history and experience with fires. I don't know if there's a way they construct their cities so that fires are more prevalent or more dangerous. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. So I was actually just in Europe for the last 2 weeks, which Jay likes to give me a little bit of a hard time about. But
I'm just jealous.
Yeah. But I was thinking about the Door Boss when I was over there, actually, because it is something that their cities are structured differently. They aren't linear. They aren't grids. You see fire trucks go down streets and you're like, wow, there's not a lot of room in that street to get through. There's definitely more of a less standardized approach to dealing with, or what appears to be less standardized from my perspective, of dealing with fires. There's not, okay, you pull up, you're at a suburban house, there's a front yard, a backyard, you know how to go walk around it, everything like that. The buildings are literally smushed together. It's much more akin to being downtown in a lot of American cities. So I think that I could see why fire has been such a interesting space in Europe. And I think that it makes sense for the Door Boss to be initially introduced and have a lot of traction in Europe.
Yeah, and it's funny you talked about the approach. One of my favorite parts of this interview is just hearing the process from call to being in the building. I think that's some information, and I've never heard that before, and I don't know where else you get that except here on the Upside Podcast.
One thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, and because last week we had Wicked Sheets on, and they seem to be our oldest podcast, this week we have Three Firefighters on, and they are our youngest podcast. So I thought it'd be nice to spend maybe a minute or two just kind of playing with some juxtaposition, the things that are different, the style of the interview that's different. What were some things that we saw that said, okay, this is a younger company, okay, this is an older company?
Well, something that I mentioned in our deal memo with Allie last week on Wicked Sheets, a lot of her intention and focus right now is around their marketing and their channels and lowering their customer acquisition costs, understanding where they're putting marketing spend, because they're already doing it. They're already seeing results in sales through all of them, and they're in a position where they can try to optimize. Michael here on the other side, he has his newest prototype that's been available for 3 years. He's essentially at the stage that Allie was when she was cutting up sheets in her living room. But he's got this now, and his biggest priority is getting this in the hands of people to show them that this can work for them, and fundraising to the point where he can manufacture these to get them in market. So, I mean, pretty stark contrast there if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, it is. There's this idea in the venture capital space of product market fit and finding it. You could say that both companies have found product market fit at this point, but that's just a hurdle, and it's a word which I don't know means much, because
I would disagree a little bit. I think
this is fun.
I think product market fit comes from when the market has validated they are willing to pay a certain price that you're willing to offer the product for. So, Michael believes that he's going to sell these for $1,500 a unit or $5,000 for a kit, which is probably based on some really good research and some conversations. But until he is actually doing that, I don't think you can technically say product market fit has been found.
So you would say Michael has not found product market fit yet, whereas Allie has.
There's no indication to show that he won't find it. It's just that technically that milestone has not been achieved yet.
Okay, that's good feedback. I like that. Let's transition to how big this opportunity is. Michael mentioned there's hundreds of thousands of fire departments. I feel like when the number gets that big, it's like, okay, there's a lot of fire departments I get it. Every city, every town in Europe, in America, I'm sure that Asia is blossoming with fire departments right now. There's a lot of potential here.
I've got some numbers.
Is it big enough? Oh, you got some numbers.
We got numbers.
Yeah, look at that. Jay, the numbers guy.
Today, this week only on the Upside Podcast. Jay does some math. So Michael mentioned that, and so I'm taking these numbers on face value. I'm taking these as truths. 58,000 fire stations in the United States that house 3 to 5 fire trucks. Let's start there. That means that there are 174,000 to 290,000 trucks. If you sold each truck a unit for $1,500, that would be a market size of $261 million to $435 million. If you went the opposite direction and said, I'm going to sell each fire station a kit, that would be a $290 million market. So somewhere between $261 million and $430 million is the market opportunity for the door boss in the United States. Internationally, he said 139,000 stations, which would bring that market close to $700 million.
So we're looking at, between the United States and Europe, simple numbers, roughly $1 billion in terms of market size.
Yeah.
Assuming you sold this door boss to every one of those fire stations and it was ubiquitous.
Right.
I think that's a pretty solid size market for such a niche market. Would you agree?
I mean, this is the type of opportunity that I think is pretty boom or bust, because you get into one of these municipalities and they just take cues from other cities that are having some success. And if this becomes something that has research behind it and it's proven that it's best practice for your fire station to have this tool because you don't have the manpower to practice flow control, it becomes almost like an accepted, nearly protected monopoly, right?
Do you think that and this is speculation, do you think that every fire department in the United States has the same axe?
I have no idea, but I had thoughts of Gimli from Lord of the Rings right when you said that. And my axe! I have no idea. Potentially. They all look the same in photos.
That's the same question, right? They all look the same in photos, but your thesis is that once something becomes brand standard for a fire department, it is national. So if that is the case, if every fire department has the same axe and the same helmets, and you're right, all of their fire gear usually looks exactly the same, then it stands to reason that once you get into a critical mass, you're going to get into 100%.
Right. I'm sure there's some, whether it's publication or convention, where these fire chiefs are apprised of like the best in class products and also, the best practices that have been learned and polished over time. And if Door Boss becomes something on that circuit, that's great. And that's another reason, like I'm saying, this is something where you talk to a few fire chiefs. If you're an investor looking at this opportunity, I really think you can learn a lot about it by talking to some fire chiefs. And if I'm Michael, I'm getting this into the hands of these fire chiefs, getting them to use it in a live fire environment and be doing everything in their power to get to the point where they can have it on their trucks and have those chiefs talk to the investors. Because I think that insight and someone that has so much on the line, if someone that has as much on the line as firefighters have, say this product is going to help us save lives, I think that's pretty compelling.
Awesome. So Jay, the question we usually finish up with is, what are you expecting or want to see from the company in the next 6 to 18 months? I think based on this conversation, we have the same answer. We want to see sales. We want to see a couple of sales, whether they're beta sales, if that's how you want to classify them. They could be kits, they could be door bosses. So I think we should flip up the question a little bit.
And I want to specify, I don't even necessarily care about sales. I want to see that this is being used in the field.
Right. That is what I meant when I said sales. That's a good clarification.
So given that we both are looking for the same thing here, we want to see this being used in the field. And to Michael, it seems that he's predicating that on being able to secure some funding to help cover liability insurance and also create enough actual units that he can put them in the hands of these chiefs around the country. What do we think is the threat here, or what could be a threat to achieving that?
What could be a threat to his achieving funding? Is that the question?
Yeah. What would hold you back here? Part of it is risk tolerance, right? It's whether or not I believe he can get this in the hands of these stations, and these stations will procure it. Part of it, the $1,500 versus $5,000 price point, I think he'll find that price point. If there's a line item in the municipality's budget that says this much is operated by the fire chief and he can buy what he needs to buy, here are the thresholds that he doesn't have to go out to bid, he can just procure things. I think he'll find that number and that will be fine. Yeah, I'm looking for some validation from the Chiefs themselves.
One thing that's interesting to me is, and it's going to sound weird, but how good is this product in terms of like quality, durability? Because if this thing's going to last for 50 years and you sell to 100% of fire stations, there's no recurring revenue outside of the SaaS model. So then this becomes a software play, and it's a whole different thesis than if it's a continuous, okay, the product's going to get a little bit better, the product's going to get a little bit better, the product's going to get a little bit better. You're going to have to buy new ones every 5 to 7 years. That kind of thing is something that as a potential investor, I would just want to understand a little bit more, and I don't understand it sitting here right now.
That's a good point. And I guess I should also note that I focused this entire conversation on the door boss, the hardware, and not talked about the accountability, the personnel on accountability software component of this, which expands the market a little bit in terms of pricing, I think, depending on how the model actually works out, if it's units versus kits. If some stations want the software but don't necessarily want the hardware, there's probably some workaround for that. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point. I would want to understand moving forward, what is this, like a 30-year product? Is this something that will last forever? Is this something that I have to replace every year? Is there going to be budget for that every year? Is it something I replace every 3 years? That's a good point. Those are things that we didn't ask.
Yeah. The idea of what am I actually investing in? Am I investing in a repeatable product, or am I investing in product with upside in the terms of software, or am I investing in a repeatable product with upside in the terms of software? I feel like that is something that I think I would need more clarity on as an investor.
Two things I forgot to mention that I also think are good signs from Michael, the founder. He has filed for a lot of IP protection around the hardware. I think that's good news. And second, he estimates that he spent $23,000 out of his own pocket, which I think is just a good sign for any founder you're considering investing in, that they have a lot of their own skin in the game before they go asking others to put some in.
I completely agree with both those points. I really enjoyed our conversation with Michael. Jay, if people want to find out more about Upside or interact with us, how do they do that?
You can find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. Tweet at us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you think about this episode. You can also comment on Breaker, our preferred podcasting platform. And if you want to open up a larger discussion, you can email us, hello@upside.fm. All right, Eric, talk to you next week.
Later.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind. Bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire. Used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep